everybody, this month's roundup is brought to you by Rise of Babel, which is a new deck building, tile laying, pick up and deliver game. It's going to be crowdfunding soon, and I'm going to have a run through for it available soon as well. So you can be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, what is it all about? Well, players are competing to be the best at contributing to the titular tower. But wouldn't you know it, Yahweh says no way to the entire endeavor, and so is spreading seeds of confusion amongst the populace. So that's one of many things you have to deal with. But how does it work? Well, every round you're going to be playing 5 cards from your deck, and most of the cards are multi-use, so they let you pursue different things, like loading up your elephant caravans to deliver building materials to the building site, or instead storing them in warehouses so you could sell them for gold to pursue more deck building opportunities, or transport stuff directly, bypassing the entire elephant network, if that's a strategy that works for you. Now, the tricky thing is, once you've actually gotten your building materials to the site, this is a communal tile laying game where everybody's building in the same spot, which means I might be trying to make a nice stone wall in one section, and if people see it, they might decide to put some wood in my way and cut me off, while also extending a wooden floor that they might be going for. So there is a lot of interaction between players as they do the tile laying, more so than a lot of other tile layers out there, I've got to say. But that's not all you've got to worry about as well, because each player has 4 different progress tracks that they can develop as well, that will upgrade their elephant caravan so you can carry more stuff, that will let you deliver things more efficiently to the warehouse, that will let you get cards into your hand faster, that will get you wild resources. There's a lot going on. And like I said, every step of the way, Yahweh sometimes jumps in as well and puts confusion tiles down. And those are chosen by either you, if you're quick, or your opponent, because you don't want your building materials next to those confusion tiles because you'll lose points. Another example of the very tight interactivity between players in this game. So there is a lot going on, and if you are looking for a sharp, multi-use card deck builder with fast, punchy, quick, pick up and deliver, and very interactive tile laying, then you might want to check out Rise of Babel. There's a link down in the show notes that you can follow to learn more about the game. And now, folks, let's round up the month, shall we? As always with these roundups, I'm going to tell you about all the games that I played last month, June 2024. I believe I have 14 to tell you about, and I'm going to be doing it in countdown format, starting with my least favorite game of the month and ending with a new game of the month. So, without further ado, folks, let's get right to it. Let's start with number 14 on the list, Time Division. And this is an interesting 2-player only direct dueling game that has a brilliant design, which I love and which makes me want to rate it much higher, but it is a very in-your-face and can be a very aggressive mind game duel as well. So it's probably a little bit too aggressive for me and Jen. What's it all about? Well, we're time travelers. Every time you play, you go to a different period in time. And the first half of the game is we do a Biblios-style card draft where I've got some cards. I'm going to give one to me, one to you, and one goes into a common pile. And I know what's there, you don't. We do that until we have our final hand of cards. Then we start playing those cards. And what happens is the lead player plays one. The other player gets to see what they've played. The other player then plays something in response. And getting to go second is hugely important so you can respond smartly to what the lead player did. But after the 2 cards have been put on these cool little pedestals, then, whichever card has the higher victory point value on it becomes the lead player going forward. And that lead player gets to make an incredibly important choice. Which of the 2 cards, belonging to me and you, will score points based on its point value up in the top left corner, and which one will activate its cool special power. And let me tell you, folks, this game is from start to finish full of head-scratchy, agonizing decisions. Because I put out a high victory point card, obviously I want to score it. Chances are, if it's got a high victory point value, it's not a very powerful card. You, in response, put out a low value card that won't give you very many points, but is a very cool, impactful power. Then what do? I want to score those big points for myself, but I don't want to let you have that power, so I could say, oh, you'll score the weak card, and I'll use the weak power on mine. What is going to be the better option? These decisions are agonizing from start to finish, and if you can anticipate what's important for your opponent, you can really put them in a tight spot by playing just the right card at just the right time to make them miserable as they have to figure out how to make lemonade out of the lemons you've given them. And you do this over and over and over again. It is a smart, brilliant game. Full of mind games and second guessing, wondering, I don't, you just played the card. Obviously, you want it to happen because it says you could go dig out the super valuable card out of the group tile, out of the group pile. But is it there? I never saw it. If I never saw it, you must have seen it. Did you put it there and you want to go get it? Or are you bluffing me and you didn't put it there? You've still got it in your hand and you want me to not score my big thing. There's so much going on with this game. And while I respect the heck out of it, you spend the entire 20-minute playtime just trying to ruin your opponent's plans over and over and over again. And so that was already a bit of a problem for me. And on top of that, my wife hated it. Oh, she hated it so much because it just requires so much double, triple, quadruple think. So if you're the type of player who likes this sort of thing, it might be worth checking out. And if you'd like to know a bit more about it, folks, well, I haven't filmed a run through. So I'm using Marco Omnigamer's videos, a great channel. As you can see, I'm subscribed. I suggest you subscribe as well. There's a link down in the show notes for his playthrough, or not playthrough, or his view, where he goes into all the different powers and all that, so you'll get a better idea of what it's like. Because I'm just really quickly summing up why it ultimately, time division, it's not you. You're perfect for what you do. It's us. We just don't like that. I love the Biblio style hand management stuff. I was excited to see in something new, but it is a very in-your-face time. And if that's what you're looking for, if you want a very dually duel that's super smart, fast playing and a lot of fun, you might want to check out number 14 of the month, which is Time Division. Now, let's move on to number 13 of the month, Rings and Things. No, I always say that wrong. It's things in rings. Got to get that right. And this is basically Venn diagrams, the party game. Although, interestingly, you can play it as a two-player game. If you play two-player, you have to play the co-op mode. If you play with three or more, you can play cooperatively or competitively. And in a nutshell, you set up a three-ring Venn diagram. One ring represents the cultural context of a given item. One, represents a attribute of the item. Is it big? Is it small? The cultural context could be: do rich people use it? Is it something you'll find in your bathroom? Stuff like that. And then the third ring is the actual structure of the word. Is it two syllables? Does it have the letter R somewhere in it? Stuff like that. So, as you might imagine, with three different secret clues that are described every time into these three rings, well, anything you could think of in the world is going to go into one or more of these rings. Or alternatively, if it doesn't fit any of these special things, like the examples I just gave, it doesn't go in a ring and it stays outside. It doesn't fulfill any of the rules. So that's the core structure of the game. But how does it work as a game? Well, there is one player who is the knower, who knows what all the rules are. And all the other players have a whole bunch of cards in their hands that are different things. And they are racing in the competitive game and the cooperative game to get all those cards correctly played into one or more of the rings. Is this a card that is two syllables and is also something you find in your bathroom? Then you're going to want to put it in the intersection between the word structure and the context. But what if it's also something that rich people use? Then it would go in the center and be all three things. So, what is a word that is two syllables, is in your bathroom, that rich people use? I want to say gold toilet, but that would be three syllables, so that wouldn't work, would it? But that could just give you an idea of you're trying to figure out, right, I've started to see, because some cards are seeded, and if a player puts a card down and it's in the wrong place, they have to draw another card, which is a penalty, because remember, we're racing to empty our hand, so they wasted time, but the knower then puts the card in the correct place. And the more cards that show up in these different rings, or at the intersections between these different rings, the more you can start to understand, what do these three things have in common? What does an egg and seaweed and a shower have in common? I don't know. But they're also a moose and a kangaroo as well. And you could start trying to figure it out so that you can make better informed guesses about where to put your cards, because you're trying to get rid of your cards as fast as you can. That's it in a nutshell. And you can play cooperatively or competitively. Personally, I've only played co-op because I've only played as a two-player game, and I would say my guess is the co-op mode is much nicer, because I expect if you were to play this competitively, it's a very silent game because nobody wants to give any clues away to their opponents because we're all racing. But in the co-op game, we're racing against the clock and everybody can talk openly, and even the knower can give clues and hints, almost Mysterium style, so they get to be involved with the gameplay. So even though the default is a competitive game, I would say the better way to play as a default is the cooperative game. And it's brilliant. Now I should say, my wife loved this thing. This was one of her favorite games of the month. I respect the heck out of this game. I think it is so sharp and so clever. And again, if you play as a co-op game, oh, it's so good. You know, it's up there with your So Clovers and your code names. But I gotta say, it came in low for me because it's my brain. I struggled so much playing this game. And so did my wife too. It's a real tough challenge trying to make these associations. But Jen, she found it to be an enjoyable challenge. I found it to be I feel so stupid. Why can't I figure this out? And so it's just not for me. I do think it's brilliant. I think as this game goes wide, there are going to be a lot of people, because like I said, I would put it in the same realm as Codenames and Mysterium and So Clover and a lot of other styles of games. But this one, I think, is so much more crunchy and so much more wide open for, interpretation, let's say. It's absolutely brilliant. I think a lot of people are going to love it. My wife loves it. I, again, respect very much number 13 of the month, things, you see, those are the cards, that go in rings, things in rings. Okay, now let's move on to number 12 of the month, Mythwind. And now this is going to come as a big shock to some people because I've been super stoked about this game for a while. You can see over there, Maggie did a great run through of the game on the channel and she loves it to pieces. And I respect the heck out of her. And a lot of board game media people who I respect the heck out of have raved hugely about this game. And so I've been super excited. Why? Because this bills itself as a cozy cooperative game of village building in a bucolic, beautiful valley, the Mythwind Valley. And it is charming as all get out. And it is very cozy. It is very relaxed, very low stakes. No barbarians are coming to invade. We're just trying to be the best crafter or hunter or farmer or merchant we can be to contribute to our own prosperity, but also communally to the prosperity of the town. Fulfilling simple rewards, occasionally having world-changing events come up, responding to changing weather, and making interesting moral decisions when certain cards call for it and all of that. And the most interesting thing about the game, the thing that had me personally most excited is whichever of those four, and there's a fifth one if you get the expansion, of those four jobs you do, they are wildly asymmetric. One player is playing a bag building game. One player is playing a push your luck game. One player is playing a buy, sell, low, high. Buy low, sell high game. And one player, the farmer right there, is playing a polyomino tile laying game with different rules completely, but all with the common goal of trying to give back to the town and help it prosper so we can complete communal objectives. And so I like everything about this game except the actual gameplay. And here's the thing, I said right up front, this game bills itself as cozy. And I've heard other people say, this is my ultimate relaxing game. Because it's brilliantly produced. All these trays that hold everything, it's incredibly easy to put away and pull out in like less than a minute and just be up and running. One of the smartest game tray designs I've ever seen. With good effect, because the game effectively has no end. It's more like a video game, like Stardew Valley or The Sims. It's just a thing you're supposed to get out, play for a while, have some fun, make some decisions, watch how the world changes, watch how you change, and then just pack it up and put it away, and then play it again in the future. Not with the goal to defeat the ultimate evil of the land or to achieve greatness so your family will live on in prosperity. No. We're just here to enjoy and relax and experience. And both Jen and I found that the actual gameplay experience is too relaxed, too laid back, too tension-free, and too slow. This game is for a lazy Sunday afternoon where you're just kind of playing along, making some simple choices, and Jen and I the whole time like, oh my gosh, when is this game going to get going? Each round, there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do with monitoring weather and dealing with events and cleanup and all kinds of stuff. But then you just get to make a couple of quick choices and then it's over. And like, oh, we're moving on to the next round. And trying to achieve anything takes round after round after round after round after round after round after, okay, we finally built a building. And that took a long time. You have to put a lot of time in to get relatively small rewards. And you just got to know that going in. And so there are people out there like Maggie, or check out the video from Tim Chewin. I love his channel as well. Man, he loves this thing to pieces, which is odd because he's normally the type of guy who wants really kind of high octane, in your face, smash my opponents into the dirt. But I remember watching him talk about how just relaxing this is. I get it. It's relaxing. But for me and Jen, it's so relaxing, it kind of put us to sleep. Everything about it is smart. The design of the individual games are smart, but they're slow and tension-free, and this has just proven to me and Jen that that is not something that we are looking for in games. So it is with a heavy heart that what I once upon a time was my most anticipated game, one of my most anticipated games of the year, comes in at a fairly low number 12 of the month, Mythwind. Okay, now let's move on to number 11, Trail Story. And now this is a very interesting game. I've already put a run through up for it so you can see more about it. But we're basically in early 20th century America. Vagabonds traveling the highways and byways of the country, meeting people, running afoul of problems, and just trying to live our best life and grow as people. That's what the thrust of this game is. We are trying to fill a journal full of engaging stories of the events that have fallen us while we live on the road. And I mean, sometimes sleeping in an old train car, making friends with a hobo. You're talking about living life on the rails. Or sometimes it means, coming across a wild boar in the forest. And okay, do I back away from this thing or is this dinner? How am I going to address it? Or just making friends with the friendly local school marm. And okay, am I going to take a class and learn something and develop a new skill? Or am I going to try and teach the school marm something as well? The game is sweet and innocent and charming. There's no real violence or aggression. It is just a game pure exploration and discovery. And I like it a lot. Now you can watch my run through to see more about it. There's one thing I don't like, and that is why it comes in so low. At the end of the day, a lot of what you're doing in this game is trying to overcome obstacles or, complete tasks. Let's just say sometimes they're obstacles, sometimes they're just, trying to do something good. Sometimes they're trying to deal with something bad. But you resolve all of them by rolling dice. And unfortunately, I'm just not a big fan of roll to resolve. I'm just not a fan of saying, okay, I've made my choice, I've spent my resources, I've pumped it up so I can roll more dice than I otherwise would, and then I roll the dice and, I still fail. Or, I succeeded, but I wasted all those resources because that one die gave me everything I needed and the other dice were superfluous. I just almost never enjoy roll to resolve. And while, to be fair, this game did roll to resolve better than just about any other game out there because it does have really smart stuff for being able to fail forward and make informed decisions. Still, at the end of the day, there's a bit too much dice rolling. If overcoming the tasks I were doing were more deterministic, like say instead of a die, it was rolling or drawing from a deck so that I could at least count cards and have a better idea of what my options are, I would have found it more interesting. But honestly, I just could have done without the random elements completely. Would have happily jettisoned that. And then this probably would have made it into my top 5, maybe my top 6 of the month. It's only the dice that keep it out. Watch my run through though. Don't trust me. Decide for yourself if it looks like fun, because I think a lot of people will fall hard in love with this game. If you like rolling dice and rolling with the punches, you're going to have a lot to enjoy in number 11 of the month, Trail Story. And like I said, folks, check out my run through. Links for it down in the show notes. Links for everything I'm talking about. Every video I'm showing you is going to be down there in the show notes, including the videos for other people's channels. Okay, now let's move on to number 10 of the month, Metrorunner, which I have not done a run through for, but fortunately, Steph Hodge of all the games, she and Michael did a great job teaching and playing the game. So again, links down in the show notes if you want to see this game in action. I'll just describe it to you. It's a cyberpunk future. It's a Blade Runner-y, neon, nighttime world, and we are hackers. We're doing the, all that kind of William Gibson stuff, but, all that sort of thing, hacking mainframes and doing jobs for corporations. Seen it before. That's fine. What's interesting about the game, it is a rondel game, and rondels are one of my favorite mechanisms of all time. That's what really made me excited about this game. Every turn, you're going to move 1 or 2 steps clockwise on the rondel, and you're either, or you can pay resources to move further if you're desperate to. But there, wherever you land, you have a choice. You do the action right there that you landed on, or instead you do the district action of the district that the space is in. So this is a multi-use rondel. Every time you move on the rondel, every space has 3 different things that could be done. It's space action or 2 different district actions you could do. So that right off the bat really opens up the game and makes it a bit more interesting than a typical rondel. And I really like that. And of course, we're doing the normal type stuff, taking jobs for corporations, which means we need to collect cubes, harvesting the correct cubes, converting cubes into other cubes, getting bonus resource cubes when we harvest certain cubes, because over time we unlock more and more special powers and whatnot that make us better at all the different actions. And then ultimately going to the right place to complete our jobs and score points and give ourselves special powers and, just kind of level up over the course of the game. So, the most interesting thing about it that stands out is one of the things we can do in this world is there's a sliding tile puzzle in the middle of the board, and that represents a mainframe that we can hack. And so there's this little mini game that sometimes players will do to actually spend their precious action points to slide and rotate tiles around to complete hacking jobs, which will give you quick, instant benefits that will help you finish the main jobs you're trying to do, but interestingly will also seed the board with bonus cubes. That suddenly there's a feeding frenzy. Once somebody hacks a job, everybody's rushing around to try to grab the scrapped leftovers that the one player created. So, it's a sharp game. It is fast. It is a great implementation of rondels. So there's a lot to like here. So why did it come in at number 10? I think both Jen and I agreed. It was low stakes. There was not a lot of tension. Players are not really directly competing for stuff very much. I'm just doing my thing, you're doing your thing. And the things you can do on the rondel, certainly at the beginning of the game, are just kind of rinse, wash, and repeat. And because, here's the interesting thing. This is the big mistake they made for Metrorunner, for Jen's and my taste. As 2-player gamers, it's a big rondel and there's only 2 of us on the board. Because one interesting thing is, if I'm moving forward, if somebody's in front of me, I have to hopscotch over them. Which means, if I were playing a 4-player version of this game, 4 of the 12 spaces are blocked at any given time. That means I am moving around much faster than normal because I'm hopscotching over players. I am having a harder time getting to the things I want to get to because more players means they might be blocking me from getting to stuff, and I'm having to make tougher choices. But they did no player scaling for this game. So as a 2-player game, it's just, now I'll do this, and now I'll do this, and now I'll do this. I don't even care what you're doing. It just doesn't matter because there's no player scaling. And the sad thing is, the game has a very sharp solo mode that basically just puts a couple of dummy players, that represent a 3rd and a 4th player on the board who move independently. If they had just applied those rules to the 2-player game, I think this would have rated much higher for me. And I'll say it right now, folks. I would suggest this is a very easy house rule to implement. Just put in the 3rd and the 4th dummy player. So if you're playing 2-player, you suddenly feel that tension. You feel, oh, I can't reach what I need to do right now unless I pay, because the two that I can get to right now are blocked by you and somebody else. In the two-player game, you'll just never feel that tension, and that's kind of a shame. Also, another thing, there's a little bonus promo pack that I would say is essential. So my rating is without the promo pack, but if you have the promo pack, you put these things into play that make certain spots on the rondelle more powerful than other spots. And then that gives you a target. That gives you something to race for. And then it gets more exciting again. And so, I believe this can be made to be a much greater two-player experience than what Jen and I played. But I'm rating it based on two-player as it is in the box. I would love to play this at a higher player count game. I think I would enjoy it a lot more there. But as a two-player game, Metrorunner comes in at number 10 of the month. Okie doke. Now, let's go on to number 9, Brink. And now, right there on the side, you can see I've done a sponsored preview for it because it's crowdfunding right now. And let me just say right now, thank you to Alex of Might I Suggest a Game, who came over and taught me how to play the game and then played this run through with me. I had a great time with that. You can check out the links down in the show notes to watch that in action. But enough about that. The game itself. This is the latest from publisher Ivy Games, who are fast becoming a premier publisher of note in the industry. And this is, most of their games have a lot, of a lot of players colluding with each other and working together, and this one has that too. But what's interesting is this is their most Euro-y game they've ever played. Their other games tend to be a little bit more confrontational. This is just a worker placement game. But it's a brilliant worker placement game because each player has 3 spaceships, a small one, a medium one, and a large one. And when you place your worker, one of your 3 spaceships, out onto the board, it either lets you harvest and activate the power of 1 tile, or that's the small. The medium lets you harvest and activate the powers of 2 tiles. And then the big one, you can see there I've just put my green down, lets you activate 3 tiles at once and harvest from 3. And just that so elevates the game. It is great to see a really fresh and novel twist on worker placement. And just that would make this game worthy of note. But that's not what really makes this game stand out. I mentioned Ivy Games are known for having lots of interaction between players. Not destructive interaction, but collaborative, negotiation, deduction. They're all about this kind of stuff. And this game, even though on the surface it's a straight worker placement game of harvesting resources and using them to do stuff, there's a lot more. One of the most interesting things about this game, probably the 2 most brilliant things in this design that come together are, 1, sometimes when you harvest from certain tiles, you don't get to keep the cubes you got. Instead, you are forced to trade them away to other players. And so, this is a game that has a huge, Settlers of Catan style trade of sheep for wool. In this game, it's influence with one faction or another. They're cubes. But what's so brilliant about this game is that because you are forced to do it, because if you don't find a trade for these things you just picked up, they'll just get thrown away. So then you're incentivized to trade. Like Bonanza, is a great example. And it's very rare that we have games with trade where players can't just I'm just going to ignore all the trade and deal with it. So that's a brilliant idea that so elevates this. The other thing that elevates it is if you're playing 2-player, where trade in 2-player games never works. Almost never works. Here it works great because there's a wonderful little automated rival who gives you options to, I don't want to trade with you in a 2-player game. I'll trade with the rival because they're giving me a really good return. And then all of a sudden me, your opponent, I've got to compete with the rival to get the cubes you just picked up. And so I'm incentivized not to compete against a human player to get the best deal, but against this rival to try to get the best deal. Because if I get frozen out of that deal, then I'm losing out. So it's better to find a way to trade with you so that we both benefit from those cubes you got rather than just you plus the rival. So smart. Board game industry, take note. Any game that wants to have negotiation in it, including Settlers of Catan, you could instantly turn into a great 2-player game by implementing this system. It's so smart. But I'm not done yet, folks. There's another brilliant thing about this game. Most of the points we get is for having influence in the 4 different factions. Because when we're putting our workers down, I didn't tell you everything. Yes, we're harvesting things. Yes, we're activating special powers, but we're also laying claim to territory. And at the end of the game, I might have claim of like 3 yellow and 1 green and 1 blue territory. And you might have a lot of red and no yellow and 1 blue, right? So we both have some blue. You've got a lot of red. I've got a lot of green. What's going to happen is all the cubes we've still got that we've been collecting that are kept secret, hidden behind a shield, we are now going to vote with them. And if you're playing 2-player, the rival is going to vote. All the stuff that was traded to them is going to go into the vote as well. You are trying to vote, so the factions I'm strong in and the ones that you're weak in are what I'm trying to vote for. But do I have enough cubes for that? Do I think I can't get it into first place? Well, should I try to get that into second place? Should I focus more on trying to... If I can't get my green to the top, what do I do to make sure your red doesn't make it to the top as well? Neither of us have much blue. Do I push blue up because I know I can't get my green because the way I was able to trade for cubes didn't work out? At the end of every round, the game takes place over 3 rounds, so there's 9 turns. Each player does 3 worker placement spots, then we have a vote to score points. Then we do it 3 more times. It's a quick game. It's a brilliant game. And why is it coming so low for me? Because that last bit is also a very cutthroat game. I talked about this, one of my longest final thoughts ever on the channel, almost an hour long of final thoughts. And I'm in danger of doing that here too. So I'm going to wrap it up. Go check out my final thoughts. But long story short, I love everything about this game, and I just wish it wasn't all in service of a battle for area dominance. Because then that makes all the fun stuff we're doing ultimately towards trying to drive each other into the dirt. So in that regard, Ivy Games has continued to maintain what they're known for. Very interactive games in very cool, clever ways. This game is brilliant. It's going to make top 10 of the year list, folks, for a lot of people when it comes out next year. I'm telling you, I'm calling it right now. Unfortunately, because it wasn't just a nice, hey, let's live and let live and do some trade, but just try to pursue our own agenda rather than trying to crush each other's agenda. That's what sadly keeps Brink at number 9 for me. Okay, now let's go on to number 8 of the month, and it is... Why can't I find a good spot to actually show the board? Tom Heath of Slicker Drips. Castellans, formerly known as Castellans of Valeria. This is the latest big box game of Valeria. I'm using Tom Heath's Slicker Drips wonderful run-through of it. Links for it down in the show notes so you can get an idea of what it looks like. By the way, if you subscribe to my channel but you don't subscribe to Tom's, you might want to rethink that because he does a great job of doing run-throughs very, very similar to what I do. Although, man, he spends a lot of time zoomed in. Please zoom out, Tom, so we can see the board. There we go. I might even have to pause if you keep zooming in like that. Anyway, though, this is very interesting to me because it is an area control game. And often, area control games don't work very well for 2 players because you really need to have a 3rd player thrown into the mix to make it more interesting. What's great about Castellans is I don't think I have ever seen an area control game that does 2-player area control better than this. Because if you're playing at a 2 or 3 player game, there is a 3rd automated player who slowly takes over territory as well. So I'm not only competing with you, but I'm competing with them. But then there is an extra variant in the rules that for a 2-player game, you can add another automated opponent. So it's like you're playing as a 2-player area control game, a 4-player game, and it's phenomenal. It works so well. And the interesting thing is, most area control games are just me about, putting my troops or my buildings, or whatever it is we're building out there, and just trying to make sure I have more than everybody else in the given region, so at the end of the game, or the end of the round, or whatever the structure is, I get the big reward for that region because I control it, because I have the majority, right? That happens here. But the thing is, you're not just putting one type of thing. You're not just putting soldiers, or towers, or whatever. You are putting manors, and lighthouses, and temples, and ships, and populace. All of these things will add to your control of a given common region, but all of them have different cool special powers they do. And that's where the crux of the gameplay decisions come from. I need to make sure, because we're about to score these two regions, I got to get into those regions heavy. But how do I do it? Do I recruit more civilians and get more special powers and put the civilians in there? Do I build more manors? They're much more expensive, but they'll give me huge game-changing powers, not little tiny powers like the civilians. Do I put more ships there? They don't do much other than help my bid for dominance, but the interesting thing about ships is they're not tied down. Later on, when I'm done with that region, I could pay to move them to the next place I'm trying to score. So there's all kinds of different things, and so while we're trying to maintain our majorities, we're also trying to leverage all these different powers. And it's freaking brilliant. This has got to be, I think, one of the best Valeria games. It's a bit much for me to say it's the best Valeria game. My favorite of all the Valeria games is Shadow Kingdom of Valeria. But I think, strictly speaking, this is maybe the best designed Valeria game to date. And then you might say, well, but then why is it coming at number 8? Because, as brilliant as it is, I've got two problems with it. The core gameplay, the action selection system is wonderful. It's dice drafting. Did I not mention that? I love dice drafting. It's a lot of fun in here because you're drafting the dice to harvest resources, and then if you use them in the right place, you get bonuses and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot that goes into the dice management and manipulation, potentially, depending on what powers you've got. And then there's all the thought about the area control to try to score big in the different areas. But there's one thing the game is missing for me, and that is direction. This is the epitome of a sandbox game, which means for some people, they're going to say, what? Oh my gosh, yes, please sign me up. Because what I mean is, all those things I just talked about you can do, they're all equally great. They're all equally worthwhile. And this game does not give everybody, a unique player power or special secret objectives that they might have that they're trying to achieve. There's just only the game, and everything is equally valid. As the game evolves and you're trying to respond to what other players have done, you start to get some direction. But at the beginning of the game, it's wide open. You can do whatever, whenever you want, because it's a sandbox to play in. And I've talked about this over the years. That's just not for me and Jen. We need just a scooch, just a smidge. Just like, hey, as far as setup, draw 2 and keep 1 secret objective that I'm trying to do. In addition to everything else I just described, I'm also trying to do this one thing. And then instantly, I've got a goal. I've got a purpose. I've got meaning. Here, and again, this is for a lot of people, great. They have to make their own meaning and set their own goals. And that is a wonderful design. I'm saying it's maybe the best designed Valeria game of all time. Just not for me and Jen, because we both really don't respond well to sandbox games. It's why I prefer Agricola to Caverna. It's why I prefer Gaia Project to Terra Mystica. It's why I prefer Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria to Castellans of Valeria. But if you like sandbox gameplay where you set your own agenda and everybody else is too, and then you respond and you pivot, you should check it out because it's so smartly done. I have one other complaint too. As brilliant as the gang at Daily Magic Games did a job of trying to make area control work for 2 by throwing in these extra dummy players, it's really disappointing they didn't do the same thing for the progress tracks. This has that same old Zulk in the Mayan calendar. In a 2-player game, progress tracks are largely meaningless because if you make it all the way to the top, you get the best score. And if I only ever move 1 step on that track, I get the second best score. And I just can't stand that. It always drives me nuts. It'd be so, I don't understand why they did the work to make the area control work with the dummy. All I had to do is say, hey, when you're putting out those dummy things to make the area control tighter and more interesting, put some dummy people to compete with on the track. So if I want to come in first or second, I got to beat the dummy. A simple thing like that would have really elevated the track gameplay also. But it's a minor thing. By the way, both the things I just said, easily fixable with house rules. There is nothing stopping you from saying, hey, as part of setup, draw 3 villager cards and keep 1. And that'll give you a little special power that only you can use. It'll give you that direction. Hey, as part of setup in a 2-player game, put a 3rd player on each of the, maybe at the 5 mark or the 7 mark, something like that, somewhere, so that you've got somebody else to compete with besides just your human opponent on the tracks, and then boom, this would have been my top 3 of the month. A couple of things like that, so elevated. But as it is, again, I'll die on that hill saying, the more I think about it, I think, yeah, this is the best Kingdoms of Valeria Kingdom game ever. Just unfortunately, doesn't work as well for me because there's just certain things that Jen and I want that other people don't need. So anyway, that was number 8 of the month, Castellans. Okay, now let's go on to number 7 of the month, Algae Inc. And now, first of all, a very sad tale of woe. Algae Inc. is published by Game Brewer, and Game Brewer is going out of business. In fact, that's why I did the run-through. They actually sent me a prototype well after their Kickstarter was done. And I didn't do a sponsored preview at all like I often do with prototypes and whatnot. I just did this run-through to get the word out to people, and I'm going to repeat it here. Game Brewer is going out of business. They have a warehouse full of games that they want to find new homes because they don't just want to pulp them all. Because they can't afford to continue the warehouse storage fees because they're going out of business. So right now they are doing amazing sales. And their games are going to disappear soon. And if you've ever wanted to get some of them, now is the time to do it. So anyway, head over to GameBrewer.com and you can learn more about that. That's why I did the run-through. But now, with that out of the way, let me just tell you about this game because, well, if this is their final game, wow. What a high watermark to go out on. In this game, players are running different departments of a company devoted to finding ways to use algae to save the world. Making plastics, making cosmetics, making biofuel, making algae-based food. And each player is doing one of those 4 things. And it means we are grabbing the algae, putting it into our production facility, and then moving it along conveyor belts to go through multiple stages until we can get it into a saleable product. Then we're competing to find markets to sell to in Europe and be the first to get there so we can get bonuses, or piggyback off of other people and deliver where one of my opponents has already delivered, so I don't get the bonus, but I don't have to spend money either. And so this is a very much industrialization, optimization engine building game, and it's brilliant at it. One of the things that really makes it stand out, other than the theme, which I absolutely love, is the way you upgrade, because there's science upgrades you can do, and there's engineering upgrades you can do. Science upgrades mean you take tiles off your production floor and reveal things underneath them. I love, Ryan Crichton of Knights Around the Table calls them peekaboo powers. That peekaboo, you pick a thing up, you get rid of that tile, and you've got a new power, right? We've seen this, going all the way back to Through the Ages. And that's always very satisfying. You spend science points to do that. But here's the deal. You have to have room over in your science lab to put those tiles if you want to get those science upgrades, the peekaboo powers. But here's the problem. Your science lab is full of all kinds of engineering projects, which are different types of tiles, and they're clogging up the space you need to be able to transfer your science tiles over. So first, you've got to clear out those dark blue engineering tiles from the science lab, and by buying those using engineering points, you can install them on your line and do all kinds of cool upgrades and whatnot. So that you make room to have this science, the light blue ones from the left, go over to the right. And there's a really interesting synergy between these things. Because, strictly speaking, you want to get those blue ones transferred as soon as you can, because the earlier you can get them, the better they are. Whereas a lot of the dark blue ones, they don't have to be done early. They could be, if you do them early, you can't even leverage them. You need to be doing them later in the game. So if you're putting those in early, you're not even using them, but you are making room to do the light blue thing. So there's a lot of interesting trade-offs in this whole little polyomino tile laying, 2 different types of tiles competing with your attention sort of game. And it's really, really cool. I really like it a lot. And there's a lot more I could talk about that I really liked about this game, and Jen really liked it too. And it's if you ever get a chance to get this, folks, don't pass on, say, oh, maybe I'll pick it up later, because this game is going to be gone soon. Game Brewer is going out of business. This is one of the best games they've ever done. Although there's so many great games they've done, Oak and Gugong and Delta, and so many, Stroganoff, and it is very, very sad to see them go. But man, they are going out on a high note. Algae Inc. is frickin' amazing. Really, really sharp industrial game. A lot to recommend there, and it comes in at number 7 of the month. Alrighty. Now, let's go on to number 6 of the month. New Frontier, Starry Rift. Okay, I have been waiting for this expansion for over half a decade now. Because I covered New Frontier when it was first made available, again, over half a decade ago. And I thought it was fantastic. New Frontier is basically Race for the Galaxy from Tom Lehman, the designer of Race for the Galaxy, repurposed into a board game instead of a card game. Another way to look at it is Puerto Rico in space. Because, of course, Race for the Galaxy was basically Puerto Rico in space, but with cards. Now you've got New Frontier, which again, I stress, came out half a decade ago. And it was brilliant. As far as I was concerned, New Frontier was superior to both Race for the Galaxy and Puerto Rico. Its design was the best of them, of those games. And I still think that's the case. One thing I mentioned, though, 5 years ago is, boy, I hope it gets an expansion, because there's one thing it's missing. I was hoping for more variety, more planet types, more special power technologies you could invest in, and all of that. And it took over half a decade, but Tom Lehman finally made it happen, and it's here now, and it is fantastic, and it completes the game. And now New Frontier, I don't think is ever going to come off my shelf. I always thought the game was great. For the same reason, Puerto Rico is great gameplay, and Race for the Galaxy is great gameplay, but New Frontiers was already better than either of them, and now that we've got all these extra things that we can work our way in, including, not for nothing, a phenomenal solo mode, a really great solo mode, which I'm demonstrating right here, because the original game did not have one, that is actually like a solo campaign you can play through. So there is so much to recommend here. I don't really need to go into it much more. You can watch my original run through of New Frontier and just imagine more cool stuff, new options, new opportunities, so much great stuff. It comes in at number 6 of the month, New Frontiers, Starry Rift. Okay. Now, let's move on to number 5 of the month, Vienna, which I've not done a run through for, but it looks like I might be doing one next month. So watch this space. Be sure to subscribe, folks, so you don't want to miss it. And while you're at it, like all those YouTubey things that I really should tell people to do more often. Anyway, though, Vienna, in the meantime. First of all, I haven't done my run through yet, so I'm leaning on Paul Grogan of Gaming Rules, another channel you should subscribe to. If you enjoy my channel, folks, you will enjoy Paul. I do. And he covered this last year when it was crowdfunding, so he had an early copy of it. What is this? This is the latest Steffenfeld City collection game. And what does that mean? Well, in case you didn't know, Steffenfeld, one of the most prolific modern Euro designers and my favorite designer of all time, for the last few years has been working with Queen Games because he's gotten the rights back to all of his games he's been making over the last 2 decades. And so he's like, hey, I'll bring them to Queen. They will do a new version of it set in another city around the world. This time it's Vienna, but they've done one set for Hamburg and Amsterdam and New York and Kathmandu and all kinds of cities all over the place. Cuzco, another one. I'll take the original design. In this case, it's a reimplementation of one of his lightest games he ever did, La Isla. And also a game that Jen and I loved, even though it never really got much love from other people. I think because people thought, oh, I want a heavier thing from a Steffenfeld game. This is too lightweight for me. But I always thought it was great. Anyway, though. It took La Isla, which was originally a game out where we are scientists. We've come to the island, La Isla, and we are studying animals in their natural habitat. They have completely rethemed it to be set in Cold War Vienna, and we are heads of spy agencies. Instead of sending out our scientists to study the animals, we're sending out our spies to collect intelligence. And it's phenomenal how well the theme transfers over. It's beautiful. And it's the same core gameplay that is so agonizingly simple and rich at the same time, because every turn you're going to draw 3 cards from a deck. One of those cards you're going to use for its special power, and you'll have that special power for a while. One of them you'll use to harvest resources you need to be able to deploy your scientists, and now instead agents, out to the board. And the other one says where you can deploy your agents. That's not it. It's... No. The third step is, but anyway, each card has one of 3 uses. You will assign each card to one of those 3 uses, and then you will play them out. The thing is, every one of those cards you want to use for every one of those uses. Every turn you have to make this decision. It is so nail-biting, so agonizing, deliciously agonizing. It was great in La Isla, and it continues to be great in Vienna. So that's all fine and dandy, but what does Vienna do that we did not have in the original game, other than a new theme. Oh my gosh, folks. I've played most all the city games. I'm planning on playing all of them. Of all of them, this one changes the base game more than any of the others. Because this one takes the simple, fast-playing, practically gateway, maybe a gateway plus, family-friendly game, and adds so much new stuff in there with cool upgrades and extra considerations and side missions you can do in addition to everything I just described. There's now so much more to this game that it stands toe-to-toe with the big, heavy fare. I mean, I'm not saying this is Trajan level, but this is certainly Aquasphere level now. Or Bruges level. It has gotten much bigger, much crunchier. There is a lot more going on, and I love it. I'm going to get rid of my copy of La Isla now because it has been well and thoroughly replaced by Vienna. And at this point now, Vienna is in my top 10 favorite Feld games of all time. And I think it is the best of the city games in the process of revamping and revisiting old designs and making them new and better. Some of them have been very good. New York was a great example. Hamburg I thought was a big improvement. Amsterdam, not so much. But Vienna is the best of all of them so far. And like I said, I think I'll be doing a run through for it soon. But in the meantime, you could follow the links down in the show notes and go check out Paul's coverage of the game. Stefan Feld never fails to impress, and I really enjoyed my time with number 5 of the month, Vienna. Okay, now let's move on to number 4 of the month. It is Aquatica, the Coral Reefs expansion, which I have not done a run through for, so I am leaning on Tom Vassell and the gang over at the Dice Tower. That's their video right there. Link for it down in the show notes if you'd like to hear what Tom and the gang think of it. I'll tell you right now, they think the same thing as me. They think it's awesome and frickin' amazing. Here's the deal, folks. This is one of those expansions. You don't always see this. A lot of times you see an expansion, oh, that's nice. That adds some new flavor to the game. Yeah, I enjoy it, but I can take it or leave it. I'm not saying it's mandatory. This is mandatory. And I confirmed it with my wife when we did her Gen Jog yesterday. She would never play Aquatica without this expansion now. It adds so much to the experience. It adds like several different things. Some of them are small, like replacing unique player powers with kings with instead unique player mantas. I could take or leave that. Don't even care about that. Some of them are medium, like these really cool little coral miniatures that once you've claimed a location and you're slowly over multiple turns harvesting it for points, during that time, you can grow corals on those tiles to be worth more points. And that's a nice touch. And there's other ways you can get these corals and seed them out. So that's nice. Of course, there's a bunch of new cards, new locations, new characters, new objectives, new tribes, because it mixes and matches with the Cold Waters expansion too. Those are all nice. And if that's where they'd stopped, I'd say, oh, it's a nice expansion to have, but you don't need it. But there's one hugely important thing. The coral tiles. As part of Setup Now, this is such a big deal, it comes with a completely new board. Well, the nice thing is, everything fits in the main box if you get rid of the insert. I can confirm that here, folks. Everything fits. You just got to dump the insert. With this new board, below each person card that you could recruit, there is now a coral tile. And so the game has become entwined drafting. When you recruit a new follower of your undersea kingdom, sorry, Tom, let me go ahead and go back. You also grab a new coral tile and you install it in one of the 5 slots where you maintain locations. And now that means whenever you put a location in there, or whenever you harvest from a location in there, or whenever you score a location, or maybe it's whenever you put a thing in a slot next to it, you get various and sundry bonuses. So it adds this whole new depth and complexity of the drafting because now there's entwined drafting. I really want that follower. That power I don't need, and it's going to replace one of my existing ones. What do I do? Entwined drafting is amazing, and it's amazing here. But then these cool powers that give you so much more you can do with those locations now, and so much more to think about. Like I said, I would never want to go back. I would never play without this. Quite frankly, I don't need to keep my original board, which actually I think means you could probably still use the insert if you throw away the original board and just use the new board. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. Long story short, Aquatica was already one of my all-time faves, and this just rockets it higher than it's ever been. I think Aquatica is now just outside of my top 100 games of all time because of this expansion. The Cold Waters expansion was very cool, introducing tribes and all of that, but if you're only going to get one, get this one. This changes everything. Aquatica Coral Reefs is amazing. And if you don't believe me, follow the link. Go check out. Skip ahead to see what Tom, Z, and Mila think about it. You'll see they agree too. It's amazing. Okay. Anyway, though, let's move on now to number 3 of the month. And it was a very good month, folks. We've got Chandigarh, which is from a relatively new designer and a relatively new publisher. I do not remember the publisher's name. I remember it was from Tony Lopez, who I know in real life is friends with Danny Garcia, one of my new favorite designers. And Tony, like Danny, comes from the video game industry. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. Let's see more video game people come in and start making board games, because it turns out they do amazing things, like Chandigarh. Now, this is a game where players are competing to do the best at developing Chandigarh, this city in, I think it was the Punjab region, if I recall correctly. It's the capital. I believe there's a nice section, talking about the history and how the city was developed, and how the gameplay of this is very much inspired by how this real-world city was developed with its sectors and all of that. But anyway, long story short, this is an incredibly elegant, fast-playing game that is at the same time ridiculously deep and crunchy and gives you so much to think about every turn. What are we doing? Well, on your turn, you are either going to get a new scoring card. As you can see, at any given time, there's 4 scoring cards out there, and your whole turn could be to grab one of those and add them to your existing scoring cards. But here's the problem. I've already got 3 scars I'm trying to score by building up the city in a certain way. And if I take a 4th card because I really want to score that thing, or the other reason I take cards is because they give me more building pieces, the materials I need to build buildings. So I got to grab these cards to get building materials, but also to give me more objectives. Here's the problem, though. When I grab one of those cards, I have to kick out one of my existing cards and put the new one in to kind of take its place. And so there are often agonizing decisions of, I need building materials right now because I can't build without them. But that means I have to kick out I have to score one of my existing tiles, and I'm not ready to score it yet. I'm just about to score a big payday. How do I deal with this? Well, I can kick out a different one instead, but that one's only just gotten started. So the game has an objective management system that is freaking brilliant. And I would love to see this done in more games. Although I love to see it here in Chandigarh too. It makes the game, the way you manage, and you have to make incredibly difficult decisions about managing your objectives. But then there's a whole other half of the game, because on your turn, you're either going to grab an objective, score an old objective and get rid of it, and also get some new building materials. The rest of the time, you have a little avatar that moves around from sector to sector of the city, and for every step you take, you can build one building with the materials you've collected earlier. And you're building those buildings to try to complete the 3 objectives you have on hand. And here's the thing, folks. This is one of those games, I'm going to skip past that. This is one of those games where we are building to a combined city. So you might desperately want to put a blue building in this space because it'll give you big points for completing your blue objective card. But you look over at me and I say, yes, please do that, because I've got a blue objective card too, and you'll be helping me score mine. And you think, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait for you to do it, and I'll work on my other objective over here. And so there is so much interaction, not destructive interaction at all, but it's just, if you pay attention to what your opponent is doing, you can really put yourself in a position to be able to piggyback off of them and take advantage of what they're doing. Because I can see your objectives. I know what it is you're trying to do. That means I could take a pretty informed guess about where you're going to go, where you're going to build. And so I could time my movement, because like one thing is, if you're the last person to put a building in a given area, well, then you get to control that sector and you get to put one of your markers on the board, which lets you score in-game objectives. So you don't want to set somebody else up to be able to put the last tile down. But remember, the way it works is you move once and then you build. And if you want to build another, you got to move again. You can't move once and then build twice. So every time you're putting something on the board, you are creating opportunities for your opponents, and you're terrified of that the whole time. But in addition to being worried about that, you're also worried about trying to maximize your objective cards you have, because you know sooner or later you have to score them whether you want to or not, just so you can get more building materials. This game is just bonkers brilliant. This, honestly, I want to say it's a Spiel des Jahres nominee. It might be too much for that. It might be a Kenner Spiel, but it should If the Spiel des Jahres and Kennerspiel des Jahres committee does not give this game its due whenever it eventually makes it into Germany, that will be a huge miscarriage of justice. Because this game deserves to be up there with your Cascadias. As far as I'm concerned, it's freaking brilliant, and it's my number 3 of the month, Chandigarh. Watch for it, folks. It's freaking amazing. Okay, now let's move on to number 2 of the month, cities. And oh my gosh, folks, I just finished talking about Chandigarh, how it was such an amazing game. It's a worthy Kennerspiel nominee. So is cities. This is such, and I've already done a run through for this. So, I'm not going to spend that much time on it. You can check out my run through, see it in action, watch my final thoughts. But this is an incredibly sharp, fast-playing, and tension-filled game of tile and piece drafting, because you're either grabbing cards or tiles, cards that give you objectives for how you want to do your tile laying, tiles to lay the tiles, some accessory tiles to accessorize the main tiles, or buildings that you want to put on the tiles. All of these to score different objectives. Everybody's got objectives. Everybody can see what everybody's trying to do. Everybody can see what new objectives there are out there to draft. And every round, and there's only, I want to say 5. Was it 5? Maybe there was only 4 rounds of drafting. It was either 4 or 5 rounds of drafting, so it's very fast. Yeah. I think so. Oh, in a 2-player game, it's 4. In a 3 or 4-player game, there's 8. But anyway, so you're only going to get a few opportunities to draft. You are going to build up your little suburb of one of 9 cities around the world: Mexico City, Lisbon, Venice, Barcelona. I can't remember all of them. But the nice thing is, whichever city you play, they give you unique public objectives that you're racing with everybody that are very thematically tied to the city in question. In fact, you could learn a lot about these cities just by, what are these objectives? And then go into Wikipedia and say, oh, I see why these objectives are so appropriate to this city. That's really cool. But anyway, it's incredibly thematically grounded, both for those city objectives, also the objectives you draft. And it's just a fast-playing, brilliant game. This might make it into my top 10 of the year. And this is another one that I think if when De Veer eventually gets this out in Germany, at some point, I don't know how the German market works, but if it ever becomes available, the design team of Phil Walker Harding and Steve Finn, they totally deserve either the Spiel or the Kennerspiel win, because this game is that good. And then you might be saying, hey, didn't everything I just say is also true of Chandigarh, right? So why did I put city higher than Chandigarh? Because Chandigarh is, at the end of the day, a communal board. Cities, we're building our own individual boards, so we can't really mess with each other. And personally, for me and Jen, we like that better. If I were more of an interactive player, I would have put Chandigarh in the number 2 spot and cities in the number 3 spot. They're both phenomenal games, and they just remind me that we live in an amazing time for board games, because we're seeing more and more of these brilliant, fast, deep, and rich and yet simple to play games. Ever since Cascadia blew up a few years ago, I think we're just seeing more and more of this, and some of them, like Cities and Chandigarh, really are cream of the crop, rise to the top, and are amazing. But all that said, not amazing as my number 1 of the month, folks. It is Life of the Amazonia. And here's the deal. This is now, I think, my 3rd highest ranked game for 2023. Here is Shay doing a run-through for it on the channel back in 2022 when it was crowdfunding. And sadly, I did not get a chance to play it in 2023 when it came out so that I could evaluate it for my best of the year. I've now played it. This game is in my top 30 games of all time. That's a big deal. Very few games, 30 of them, make it into that. I know I have a tendency or proclivity to say everything is really, really great because, hey, I only play great games. Although I play games I don't like too, and that's why you watch the roundups. You hear me rank them all and why I like some and I don't like others. But anyway, this game is top tier. It is so amazing. Like I said, top 30 best game of all time, the number 3 best game of 2023. And 2023 was already my 2nd best game in all of board game, or year in all of board gaming. So this is the 3rd best game of the 2nd best year in all of board gaming. So as you might imagine, I think it's pretty good. But why? Well, you can go watch Shay play through a prototype of it. The final version looks even nicer, and the prototype already looked really nice. This is a bag builder. Oh, by the way, retroactively, we did a top 10 bag builders on the R&R show a few weeks ago. I have to retroactively say this is the best bag builder in board game history, supplanting everything else we talked about. I just hadn't played it at the time, and now I have. But anyway, we are trying to make, and protect nature reserves in the Amazon to be able to help struggling wildlife, find their footing and grow and be thriving. That's what we're trying to do in this game. A worthy goal, which is basically something that people better than me are doing in the real world. But hey, I can do it in cardboard form. But it's driven by bag building. Every round, you're going to draw chips out of a bag, and these chips either represent money we have to be able to buy more chips, more investments. Leaves, which allow us to, basically lay more tiles, so we have a bigger and bigger biome that we're trying to develop. Food, so that combined with other things, we can actually attract animals, and we try to get them to score in different ways, depending on what type of animal they are. Very Cascadia-ish in that regard. And what was the fourth thing? Oh, water, which we use to activate insect special power cards off to the side. Environment cards, which are bonus scoring opportunities, and insect cards, which are special one-time big game-changing powers. And so you've got all these things in the bag. And of course, you're buying more chips, but every round, as your bag gets fuller of bigger and more powerful chips, you're doing bigger and bigger, more powerful turns, trying to do the right tiling, the right animal population, activating the right special powers at the right time, and investing more and more in your operation so you can get better and better. With an eye. Every time you play, there's always going to be 8 main animals: the toucans and the macaws and I think they were the leaf frogs and the otters and the jaguars. But every time you play, they're going to score in a different way. Very Cascadia. And in fact, it's very hard not to draw comparisons to Cascadia. It's a radically different game because it's a bag builder. It's not a tile drafting game, right? There's 8. Plus, every player has their own special, unique animal. So there's really 9 different types of animals you're trying to deal with. More than twice what you have to deal with in Cascadia. And every time you play, there's going to be a different combination of ways you could score. But this game is probably the equivalent of Cascadia with like 5 different expansions loaded in. This is a big beast of a game with a ton of stuff going on. It's exactly in my wheelhouse. Rich, crunchy, complex with a lot of moving parts, but not too complex that it bogs down or you get overwhelmed with little minutia rules and whatnot. It's just the right level of chef's kiss perfect, and it's phenomenal. Every time you play, you're going to get a radically different experience, and the bag building is so great because actually it reminds me, Dominion, of course, all pool building games owe a tip of the hat to Dominion for really popularizing the idea of pool building or deck building in that game. And it's interesting, one of the first expansions for Dominion was one of my favorites, Alchemy. And everybody else hated it, but I thought it was amazing. And it did something that no other expansion for Dominion has ever done, even though Dominion has done everything under the sun. It was the idea of having an additional type of resource. And that's what makes Amazonia so interesting. You have got 4 different types of resource in that bag, of varying powers. And when you reach into the bag, you might pull out, a lot of one type of resource, or a few of just a different one, or a single really big one, and then a bunch of really smalls of other ones. And so every time you play, because there are 4 different types of resources that you are pulling out of your pool, every round, every turn you take is an incredible puzzle trying to figure out, right, how best to use this combination of resources, including the fact that if you're desperate, any 2 resource chips can stand in for something else. And sometimes you'll do the most unthinkable thing. You'll have like a level 4 water that will let you activate cool stuff, and yet you'll turn it into half of one food because you just need that one food to get that jaguar because there's only one of them left and you've got to do it. This game makes you make tough decisions over and over and over again. Every turn is such a fun, satisfying puzzle. And on top of everything else I said, this has got to be, and again, this is a prototype. It does not do the final game justice. This is one of the prettiest, most beautifully produced games I own, period. If it does not, we're getting to the point where, like Golden Geek Awards and the Dice Tower Awards are doing their, hey, here's all our special awards for little things like first-time designers and game production. If this doesn't get some game production awards, I'm going to flip a table, folks, because it is stunning how gorgeous this game is. But that doesn't even hold a candle to how good it is. Like I said, it's in my top 30 games of all time. It is my number one game of the month. It is Life of Amazonia. And that's it, folks. Done. Oh my goodness. I only talked about 14 games. Why does it take me so long to do this? You've been very patient. You've made it to the end. And I have nothing for you now other than to say thank you very much for watching, as always. And we'll be back again next month with another roundup. And also, of course, thank you very much to Bedouin Games, the publishers of Rise of Babel. Watch for my run-through coming soon. And watch for it to launch on Kickstarter coming soon as well. There's a link down in the show notes. See you next month, everybody. So long. Bye-bye.